Throughout modern history, the world has witnessed some of the most extreme hostage situations that tested the limits of human endurance, political will, and military precision. These harrowing events, driven by ideological fervor, desperation, or sheer terror, have left indelible marks on nations and individuals alike. From embassies under siege to planes hijacked mid-flight, the resilience of hostages and the courage of rescuers tell stories of survival, tragedy, and heroism. Join us as we delve into the 10 most extreme hostage stories that shook the world to its core. In the late 1970s, Iran was a nation on the brink of transformation. Under the rule of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the country experienced rapid modernization and westernization. However, widespread discontent due to political repression, economic issues, and cultural changes simmered beneath the surface. The discontent erupted into the Iranian Revolution of 1979, led by Ayatollah Khomeini, who promised a return to traditional Islamic values. The Shah was overthrown, and Khomeini became the supreme leader of the new Islamic Republic of Iran. On November 4, 1979, the revolution reached a critical juncture. Militant students, angry over the U.S. granting asylum to the Shah, stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. They took 52 American diplomats and citizens hostage, demanding the Shah's extradition to face trial in Iran. The hostages endured 444 days of captivity, facing psychological and physical hardships. The crisis gripped the world, dominating headlines and leading to nightly updates on the hostages' fate. Diplomatic negotiations were fraught with difficulty, and a daring rescue mission, Operation Eagle Claw, ended in disaster when a helicopter crash in the desert killed 8 U.S. servicemen. Finally, on January 20, 1981, the hostages were released, coinciding with the inauguration of President Ronald Reagan. The crisis had profound effects on U.S.-Iran relations, shaping policies and perceptions for decades. The Iran hostage crisis was a pivotal moment in U.S. foreign policy. It exposed vulnerabilities and reshaped how America engaged with the Middle East. Decades later, the echoes of the Iran hostage crisis continue to resonate. It remains a stark reminder of the volatility of international relations and the enduring human spirit in the face of adversity. In September 2004, the small town of Beslan in North Ossetia, Russia, was forever scarred by one of the most brutal hostage crises in history. The conflict in Chechnya had spilled over, and militant separatists were determined to make a horrific statement. On September 1, 2004, over 1,100 people, including 777 children, were taken hostage by Chechen militants in School Number 1. Armed with explosives and weapons, the attackers demanded recognition of Chechnya's independence and the withdrawal of Russian forces. For 3 days, the hostages were held in harrowing conditions. The militants showed no mercy, and the world watched in horror as the standoff continued. Water and food were scarce, and the fear of imminent death was constant. On September 3, 2004, Russian special forces stormed the school. The ensuing battle resulted in chaos and bloodshed, with 333 hostages, including 186 children, losing their lives. The siege left a deep psychological scar on the survivors and the entire community. The Beslan school siege is a somber reminder of the devastating impact of terrorism and the innocence lost in conflicts. It underscores the importance of addressing the root causes of such violence to prevent future tragedies. In 1977, Germany was grappling with a wave of terrorism from the Red Army faction. This period, known as the German Autumn, saw numerous acts of violence aimed at destabilizing the state. On October 13, 1977, Lufthansa Flight 181 was hijacked by 4 members of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. The hijackers demanded the release of RAF members imprisoned in Germany and a ransom of $15 million. The hijacked plane made stops in Rome, Cyprus, Bahrain, Dubai, Aden, and finally Mogadishu, Somalia. The hostages endured 5 days of terror with threats and abuse from the hijackers. On October 18, 1977, German Special Forces GSG-9 stormed the plane in a daring raid in Mogadishu. All 4 hijackers were killed, and all 86 hostages were rescued. The successful operation was a significant blow to the RAF and marked a turning point in Germany's fight against terrorism. The Lufthansa Flight 181 hijacking highlighted the effectiveness of counter-terrorism efforts and the resilience of those caught in such crises. It remains a pivotal moment in aviation security history. In June 1976, Air France Flight 139 was hijacked by 2 Palestinian and 2 German terrorists, part of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, external operations. The plane was diverted to Entebbe Airport in Uganda. The hijackers demanded the release of 40 Palestinians held in Israel and 13 other detainees imprisoned in Kenya, France, Switzerland, and Germany. They threatened to kill the hostages if their demands were not met. The 248 passengers and crew were held in the old terminal building at Entebbe. Non-Israeli hostages were released, while the 94 remaining, mostly Israelis and Jews, faced increasing danger. On July 4, 1976, Israeli commandos launched a bold rescue mission, storming the terminal and rescuing 102 hostages. The operation, known as Operation Entebbe or Operation Thunderbolt, was a remarkable success. Though 3 hostages and 1 Israeli commando, Yonatan Netanyahu, were killed. The Entebbe Raid showcased the Israeli military's prowess and the importance of international cooperation in counter-terrorism. It remains one of the most celebrated rescue missions in history, exemplifying courage and tactical brilliance. On October 23, 2002, 40 to 50 armed Chechen militants stormed the Dubrovka Theater in Moscow during a performance, taking around 850 hostages. This was during the Second Chechen War, a period marked by intense conflict and brutal tactics. The militants, led by Movsar Barayev, demanded the withdrawal of Russian forces from Chechnya. The siege drew immediate international attention, with fears mounting over the militants' willingness to carry out their threats. For nearly 3 days, the hostages endured terrifying conditions. The militants rigged the theater with explosives, creating a highly volatile situation. Russian authorities were under immense pressure to end the crisis. On October 26, 2002, Russian special forces used a chemical agent to incapacitate the militants before storming the building. The operation led to the deaths of all militants, but also resulted in the tragic loss of 130 hostages, primarily due to the effects of the gas. The Moscow theater hostage crisis highlighted the complexities and dangers of counter-terrorism operations in urban environments. It raised serious questions about the use of chemical agents and the preparedness of emergency services. The 1972 Munich Olympics were intended to showcase a peaceful and united world. However, the Games were tragically overshadowed by a brutal terrorist attack carried out by the Palestinian group Black September. On September 5, 1972, 8 Black September terrorists stormed the Olympic Village, taking 11 members of the Israeli Olympic team hostage. The terrorists demanded the release of 234 prisoners held in Israeli jails and 2 German radicals. The world watched in horror as negotiations unfolded. German authorities struggled to manage the crisis, and the initial rescue attempts were fraught with missteps and miscommunication. A botched rescue attempt at the Furstenfeldbruck Air Base ended in tragedy, with all 11 hostages killed, along with 5 of the terrorists and a German police officer. The massacre shocked the world and exposed significant flaws in counter-terrorism preparedness. The Munich Olympic Massacre had profound implications for international security and counter-terrorism. It led to the establishment of specialized counter-terrorism units, including Germany's GSG-9, and fundamentally changed the approach to securing international events. In September 1970, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, or PFLP, orchestrated a series of hijackings, targeting multiple flights and forcing the planes to land at Dawson Field, a remote airstrip in Jordan. On September 6th, PFLP operatives hijacked TWA Flight 741, Swiss Air Flight 100, and Pan Am Flight 93. A fourth attempt on El Al Flight 219 was thwarted, and the plane diverted to Cairo. A fifth plane, BOAC Flight 775 was also hijacked a few days later. The hostages, numbering over 300, were held in harsh conditions. The PFLP demanded the release of Palestinian prisoners in exchange for the hostages, using the planes as leverage. After tense negotiations, most hostages were released, but the PFLP blew up the empty planes as a dramatic statement. The remaining hostages were freed following further negotiations, marking a significant episode in the history of air piracy. The Dawson Field hijackings underscored the vulnerabilities of civil aviation and led to significant changes in international air travel security protocols, including the implementation of stricter screening and monitoring measures. On December 17, 1996, the Japanese embassy in Lima, Peru, was hosting a diplomatic reception when 14 members of the Tupac Amaru Revolutionary Movement, or MRTA, stormed the building, taking hundreds of hostages. The MRTA demanded the release of their imprisoned comrades and improvements in prison conditions. The siege began a prolonged standoff that lasted for 126 days. The hostages, including high-ranking diplomats, businessmen, and military officials, faced an uncertain fate. Negotiations were slow and challenging, with intermittent releases of hostages adding to the tension. On April 22, 1997, Peruvian special forces launched a surprise assault on the embassy, freeing all remaining hostages. All 14 MRTA members were killed in the operation, along with 2 hostages. The Japanese embassy hostage crisis highlighted the complexities of resolving prolonged hostage situations and the importance of precise planning in rescue operations. It remains a significant event in Peru's fight against domestic terrorism. On February 4, 1974, Patricia Hurst, the 19-year-old granddaughter of publishing magnate William Randolph Hearst, was kidnapped from her Berkeley, California, apartment by the Symbionese Liberation Army, or SLA. The SLA, a radical leftist group, demanded the release of 2 of their imprisoned members and a food distribution program for the poor as conditions for Patty's release. During her captivity, Hurst was allegedly brainwashed and eventually joined the SLA, participating in criminal activities, including a bank robbery. Her transformation from victim to accomplice captured national attention and sparked widespread debate. Patty Hearst was arrested on September 18, 1975, and charged with multiple crimes. Her trial and subsequent conviction for bank robbery were highly publicized, raising questions about coercion and personal agency. The Patty Hearst case remains one of the most controversial and complex kidnapping stories in U.S. history, raising important issues about Stockholm Syndrome, media influence, and the nature of radicalization. On April 30, 1980, 6 armed Iranian Arab separatists stormed the Iranian embassy in London, taking 26 hostages. The gunmen, members of the Democratic Revolutionary Front for the Liberation of Arabistan, demanded the release of prisoners held in Iran and safe passage out of the UK. The takeover quickly drew the attention of British authorities, leading to a tense standoff. The hostages, which included embassy staff and visitors, were held at gunpoint as negotiations began. For 6 days, negotiations between the British government and the terrorists continued. The situation remained precarious, with threats of execution escalating the urgency for a resolution. On May 5, 1980, after the execution of 1 hostage, the Special Air Service, or SAS, launched Operation Nimrod. The assault was broadcast live on television, showcasing the SAS's precision and effectiveness. All but 1 of the hostages were rescued, and 5 of the 6 terrorists were killed. Operation Nimrod is considered a textbook example of counter-terrorism success. It significantly boosted the reputation of the SAS and set a new standard for hostage rescue operations worldwide. We've explored 10 of history's most extreme hostage situations, marked by desperation, bravery, and tragedy. From Entebbe to London, these stories highlight the struggle between fear and freedom. We honor the victims and heroes whose lives were changed forever. Their stories inspire and remind us of the need for constant vigilance. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.